to everyone. I hope you're all doing well, inshallah. We'll be making a start now. I'm Ihtisham. I'm one of the BIMA volunteers, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair to everyone for attending our financial planning tips for healthcare professionals webinar in collaboration with Simply Ethical. So just a few things first. Who is BIMA? Alhamdulillah. I'll say next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Can you not see the slides?
Yeah, we can see the first one. Can you go to the second slide?
Yeah, 1 second.
Perfect. So yeah, a few things first. Who is BIMA? We are a network of over 10,000 Muslim healthcare professionals across the UK. And our mission is to empower, unite, and advocate for thriving Muslim healthcare professionals to build equitable communities. And we aim to do this through various projects, some of which you can see on the screen right now. Next slide, please. One of the projects we are very excited to announce is our British Muslim Health Awards event, which will be in Birmingham on the 13th of December. We'll be celebrating Muslim excellence in healthcare. And of course, there are discounts for BIMA members and team volunteers. Tickets are selling out, and we're really looking forward to this. And we really want to see you there. So if you haven't grabbed a ticket yet, what are you waiting for? Now, moving on to today, our webinar will be delivered by Brother Faisal Kabani and Brother Jack Fellows. Faisal is a CEO and experienced financial advisor at Simply Ethical, which he founded himself in 2009 to provide authentic, best-in-class, ethical and Sharia-compliant investment solutions. Faisal is a chartered accountant and began his career at PwC and GSK, gaining broad experience in global finance before specializing in Islamic finance in 2005. Since then, he has led innovation in the UK's Islamic finance sector, pioneering the first Sharia-compliant robot advice platform, bespoke equity portfolios, and several ethical investment products. An approved trainer for the Islamic finance qualification and author of Mastering Islamic Finance, Faisal is widely recognized for his leadership and contributing to advancing ethical and Islamic finance. We'll also be joined by Brother Jack Fellows, who is a financial advisor. And after founding Islam, he pursued his passion of ethical finance as a consultant for Simply Ethical. He also has a strong background of working extensively on the NHS pension. One final thing just before we start. To maximize your benefit, if you are a paying general member of BIMA, you can log into your BIMA membership portal, My BIMA, where you can book a free financial consultation with Simply Ethical, which are usually around £125. If you're not a member, not to worry, you can subscribe for £10 a month and get access to all these membership perks, as well as support the BIMA mission. Now, without further ado, we welcome Simply Ethical's Faisal Kabani.
Take off my mute. Yeah, sorry, I just start sharing again. Forgive me. Let me just. Right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hope you're all well. Thank you for taking out time on your Wednesday evening to be with us today. And I'd like to thank BIMA for giving us the opportunity to present to you today. This topic of financial planning is obviously what we live and breathe as professionals in this area. And we're passionate about trying to help people prepare for their financial futures, have better and more productive and more fruitful financial futures through their working life and beyond. And like anything in life, you need to give it some focus and attention. And hopefully today, what we're trying to do is basically go through some good tips for you to follow. We have got very limited time, so essentially we will be going through things at quite a pace. But sorry, things are moving a little bit forward on the slides. I think it's just programmed to do that. But that's not a bad thing because there's a lot to get through. But suffice to say, Simply Ethical is a FCA regulated entity. We are basically have fully qualified financial advisors in the team, and everything that you'll hear today hopefully is not advice, but hopefully gives you a very good sort of picture of what we can do and help you with. There's going to be some key areas we're going to cover today. There will be the NHS pension scheme, which my colleague Jack will cover with you. And there'll be some important tips on investing and retirement planning and sort of doing it in a tax efficient way, which is all important to all of us. So the first thing to start off with is Simply Ethical as an organization. We focus on Sharia compliant financial planning, something which aligns with the beliefs and values that Muslims hold. But these beliefs and values hopefully are universal. They are something that I think resonates with all human beings. And we're not going to focus too much today on what those beliefs and values are, but it suffice to say that this diagram here represents some very important characteristics within Islamic finance. So apologies for this. I didn't bank on the slides doing this, but essentially you'll see here on the screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to come out of that depiction there, just share the slides in this way. Hope that's okay for everyone. That's a better way because the slides will stop moving. But essentially, what you see there are human values for many, ethical values, lawful activities, things which are effectively bad for humanity, prohibition of gambling, prohibition of speculation. But the one that I think probably sticks out more than anything, and for Muslims it resonates, it's mentioned in the Quran very clearly, is the prohibition of riba, which is widely translated as prohibition of interest, which is very wide and commonplace in the modern financial system. So that is the reasons behind that. There can be a whole lecture on that in terms of the modern financial system, and the way the fractional reserve banking works, etc., and the prevalence of debt in society. But as a Muslim, if we just take that as these are the kind of the values that we should try to aspire to keep to, then what we try to do in Simply Ethical is to provide investment choices and financial planning in relation to that, which keeps to these values. And Islamic finance, as a kind of a discipline, if you like, is not an exact science. And what I mean by that is that if you come into Islamic finance expecting that everything is riba free and it's perfectly pure from an Islamic perspective, unfortunately, we live in a time and an age in the world today where that is not the case. So when we think about investments today, most people will be very cognizant of things like the stock market, which is a key investment tool in the modern world for people with pensions and ISAs, etc. But when you look at shares on the stock market and the companies that you can invest in, you'll find not many which are completely free of riba. So they may have even just money sitting in a bank account earning interest. So it's very hard to be completely pure in that sense. So what Islamic finance is on a journey really, which kind of started in the modern era in the sort of 1970s, 80s, where there's been a big movement to try to get Islamic products, if you like, or Sharia compliant products on the market. And it's been a journey where basically we've had to look at the world, look at what the investments are out there, and try to put together products which come as close as possible to the principles. And we're still on that journey, and there's still a lot of work to do. But what we have in Islam, in Simply Ethical, is what I've got on this slide, just to give you a flavor of the type of investments that we will use. They will be in equities, which I just talked about in terms of shares. There will be investments related to property. There will be investments related to commodities, mainly precious metals like gold and silver. And there is one investment there which is called Islamic bonds, Sukuk, which many of you may not be aware of. But essentially, they are certificates of ownership in some kind of asset or some kind of business that is producing an income usually. And that's usually, so normal bonds, which you see that people invest in the conventional world, are either two types, usually government bonds or corporate bonds, and they pay an interest. They're effectively a debt instrument. And in Islamic finance, in Sharia compliant investing, we can't use those instruments. So the kind of answer to that from an Islamic perspective is these Islamic bonds or sukuk, which again we don't have the time to go deeply into in terms of what they are and what they represent. Also, just to give you a flavor of when we invest in shares, this is kind of screening criteria, which is kind of well developed in the Islamic finance world on how shares are selected for Sharia compliance. So what you have is two sets of criteria. One is a qualitative criteria and one is a quantitative criteria. The qualitative criteria is try to mainly screen out uh, areas of investment which would be prohibited Islamically. So you can see things like alcohol, gambling in there. And then the quantitative criteria is really, we can't get to 0% purity in terms of, no riba, etc. So effectively, the scholars have permitted certain thresholds as a way of being practical and pragmatic about how we can invest in the modern world in the best possible way and try to work towards purer principles over time or purer investments over time. So what I've got here is probably, again, I'm not going to spend time going through these criteria, but I think I just want you to take away from the fact that there are these criteria which we then try to adhere to. Now, from a simply ethical perspective, again, these slides will be made available to people so you can look at it more closely. What we've tried to do in Simply Ethical on this table, what we show is effectively there are different organizations which are employing these criteria, which I shared with you pretty much on the previous slide. But Simply Ethical is try to go one step further than when we pick shares in the stock market, we use a stricter criteria from a Sharia perspective. And that kind of embodies the spirit of the fact that we're on this journey in Islamic finance where we had to take very pragmatic, practical steps to come up with something which was acceptable to scholars given the modern context, given the modern reality. But over time, we need to work towards purer and better investment choices from an Islamic perspective. And that's what we try to do at Simply Ethical. Over time, we're trying to make those criteria tighter from a Sharia perspective so that hopefully you have something which is closer to the principles of Islamic finance. Now, that really kind of sums up in a very quick sense some of the key essence of investing in a Sharia compliant way. The kind of theme throughout this presentation, what I would like to draw you to is, we're going to be touching on things. I would urge you to either visit our website. There are other websites out there as well, but we have a blog section on our website which covers a lot of these things in a lot more detail. Our website itself has a lot of detail about Sharia compliance and the methodology that we use, etc. And the free consultation is there. So we'd be delighted to talk to you if you have any questions after this presentation, which we can't fit in today. Going on to then the sort of the financial planning side of things, what you see from this diagram is that life is a journey. We're all on that journey at different stages. And finance and wealth is a part of that journey, and we can't really get away from that. You need to think about how you're going to fund your life from the basics of having shelter, clothing, making sure that you've got all your essential needs, to other things, sending your children to university, for example, or, doing things in your life which you might want to do. Maybe even these days, going for Hajj, for example, is a big financial expense. So you need to plan for that. Then you've got retirement. You've got to think about the day you stop working or when you want to start slowing down. How do you plan for that? And then ultimately, we pass on our wealth to others when we leave this world. So all of that encompasses wealth and finance, which we need to think about. And what I'm going to hopefully demonstrate to you through this presentation is that the more you plan, the better you plan. That journey is going to be hopefully much easier for you and more fruitful. So, when you think about your goals, financial goals, you really need to sort of break it down. How much do I need to invest to get to my goal? Where do I invest, and choose an account? So investment. So, the thing that, the first basic thing is, if you leave your money in the bank doing nothing, it's going to start to get eaten away by inflation, which is there. So the real value of that wealth is declining. Secondly, you have to think about zakat on that money as well. So you'll end up paying 2.5% on that money. So if you don't do something productive with that wealth, effectively, you cannot lose by zakat. Allah promises us that you cannot lose by zakat. But at the same time, you do need to plan for that, and it's depreciating by inflation. So the moral of the story is that you should be thinking about doing something productive with your money in the bank and not just leaving it there. Otherwise, you're actually, not even staying on the same level. You're actually going down. So, think about, what your life goals are, how much you need in the future, and then you work backwards to say, how much do I need to invest regularly and for how long? This is an example which illustrates quite powerfully, the kind of the power of investing relatively early. So you've got, an academic year university will cost around 18,000. You've got the student fees around 9,000, and then you've got the cost of living out, etc. Now, that is over 3 years, a typical degree course will be £54,000. Now, look at this as an example. If you actually plan for this since from the moment your child was born over 18 years, you could actually put away £127 a month. And if that's growing at an average rate of 7% per annum, then you can accumulate up to £54,000 by the time the child is 18. If you delayed it by 5 years, it goes up to £215, £215 a month. So you can see that just by a delay of 5 years, you've gone up significantly in terms of the amount you need to save every month. And that point I'm going to hopefully reiterate as we go through this presentation. The other thing I wanted to highlight is power of compounding. I mean, some people maybe maybe a bit of an exaggeration to call it the eighth wonder of the world, but I've heard people say that because it's actually quite a phenomenal kind of concept, in the sense that you've got this depiction here on this graph. You've got someone called Jack who starts investing at the age of 25, invests £20,000 every year for 10 years. So basically, at the age of 34, stops investing. By that age, he's invested £200,000, but by the age of 34, that's obviously been growing as he's been investing. So that's 295,000. And by the time he's 65, because of this growth that we're assuming here, that basically he accumulates up to 2,250,000. Whereas you've got someone like Jill, basically, who starts investing at the age of 35, so basically 10 years later than Jack, and invests 20,000. So basically, every year is investing 20,000. So, and for every year for 30 years. So she invests £600,000, starts 10 years later, but by the age that they're 65, she's 65, she has actually less than Jack. So you can see that she would have invested over double of what Jack has invested, and for much longer. And Jack's actually ended up with more money. And that's purely because he started investing earlier and is given that trajectory and time and runway for that money to grow over a longer period of time. And that's why he's got to that level. So it's a very powerful concept. So for those of you out there who are thinking, yeah, one day I'll start investing when I've got a little bit more money, etc. Actually, you're better off starting to invest early and do it regularly and basically for a longer period of time, because you're allowing that power of compounding to really help you in that journey. So, don't be fooled by, the fact that you can't do much. It's better to invest even a little bit and on a regular basis, and that will really help you really build a better return in the long term. The other thing that we're going to focus on today is very much that tax plays a big role in the world we live in, and to invest in a tax efficient way is smart and is the right thing to do. So, you know, when you're looking at an investment, look at what the tax side is going to be like, what other ways you can mitigate tax. So you've got things like an ISA, which you can use in this country, which basically allows you to invest up to £20,000 a year in a tax efficient way. So there's no tax on the gains or the income within an ISA. So you should use that as a kind of for your short to medium term investment. That is a very good vehicle. You've got basically a children's version of that, junior ISA, which you can invest up to £9,000 a year for your children. And then basically for retirement savings, you've got the pension side, which we're going to cover in quite a lot of detail today. The stocks and shares ISA is really a very good one. You know, you should definitely think about it. Between a couple, you can have up to £40,000, and it's a very good way to do your regular savings through for things which you'll need in the next 5, 10, 20 years before your retirement age. Right now, I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Jack, who's a colleague of mine. So Jack is someone who we met a few months ago, and mashallah, it's been a great privilege and an honor to already spend time with him. He's mashallah taken a beautiful journey into Islam, and you know he's an experienced financial advisor, has quite a lot of expertise within the NHS pension scheme, and you know we're doing some work together now, and hopefully we'll do a lot more together going forward. But Jack, if I can hand over to you, and I can navigate the slides for you as you're going through this. But if you can just go through the NHS pension side of things, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, certainly. Thank you, Faisal. Firstly, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's an absolute pleasure to be presenting to all of you this evening. Inshallah, as Faisal said, I'm going to go through some of the key features with regards to the NHS pension and also share some tips that I think you'll find useful with regards to making financial plans. So let's just make sure, first of all, that we're all on the same page in terms of what your NHS pension actually is. So you'll see here on the left-hand side, you've got the 1995 and the 2008 schemes. I'll be referring to them as the 95 and the 08 schemes. And on the right-hand side, you'll have the 2015 scheme, the 15 scheme, as I'll refer to it. So on the left, you have the old schemes. They are now closed. As of 2022, everybody will be, if you are contributing into the new scheme on the right-hand side. And just to make you aware that your NHS pension at retirement effectively is going to be a merge of all of these different pensions. You own all of them simultaneously, and they can pay you simultaneously as well. And so I'd just like everybody to know exactly what they've got. And just because you're in the 15 scheme doesn't mean now that the 95 and the 08 scheme disappear. You still own them. So I'm going to layer the detail now. Faisal, yeah, thank you. Next slide. Yeah. So what are the most pertinent features? Right, so please don't think poorly of yourself in terms of not understanding the NHS pension. They are horribly convoluted, and this slide here typifies that. So you've got 3 columns, the 95 column, the 08 column, and the 15 column, and this is the sort of information you will see if you look at the members' guides for each of those schemes, which you may be a member of. And so you'll see there's the type of pension, the final salary, or the care pension, which is career average revalued earnings. You'll see an accrual rate of 1/80th or 1/60th. Really, if I'm honest, this is permission now. You can kind of ignore all of that, because to make plans for yourself, your family, financially, for now, for the future, to provide yourself with security, and a clear plan of what you're aiming toward in the future, you can really, for all intents and purposes, ignore all of that, because it's encapsulated in your annual benefit statement. You're going to get that through the post every year, and it's going to show you what your benefits are worth. So for example, if you're in the 1995 scheme, it might say that at retirement it's going to pay you £10,000 per year, and it will provide you with £30,000 as a tax-free lump sum. That's the culmination of all of those top 4 rows in one. So if you're actually going to make plans and you need something useful to do that with, I suggest you use what is in the red box there, the normal pension age and the minimum pension age. If you take one thing away from this presentation this evening, this would be a really good point. So the 95 scheme, you will be receiving your benefits normally at age 60. So what does that mean? If you have £10,000 worth of benefits that have been accrued in that scheme from age 60 until the day that you pass away, it will pay you £10,000 per year. And the same would apply for the 08 scheme and the 15 scheme. They're just slightly older ages that it would begin to pay you. And then you can see beneath that you have the minimum pension age. Each of the schemes says 55. And what that means is basically with each of the schemes, you can actually elect to receive your benefits earlier at the earliest age 55. However, if you remember that this is paying you from the day that you request to receive the benefits until the day that you die, because you are making that longer, the NHS will pay you less as a result. So each of the pensions, their normal pension age is 60, 65, and the state pension age respectively. Each of them you can take your benefits earlier, but you will receive less because you're receiving it for longer. And then finally, a really important point that a lot of people miss is with the 1995 scheme, you can see there next to late retirement factor, it says no. And basically what that means is if you decide not to take your 1995 pension at age 60, you'd say take it at 62, you will not be benefited for doing so. It will not reward you for doing so. It will not increase for doing so. However, that is the case with the 08 and the 15 pensions. And that's why most people, when they're coming up to about age 55 in the 1995 scheme, they may have letters coming through the post saying, you want to consider your options with regards to retiring. That's really what it's trying to tell you is you've got something here that is very valuable. It will start paying you at age 60. However, it won't benefit you to delay that. Put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to what your options are in just a moment. Faisal, if you could go to the next slide.
Yeah, sure.
Right, so I'd like everybody to also understand where do your payments actually go? And I've seen a couple of comments so far asking questions around this. So really nice and clearly, the best metaphor I can give you for your NHS pension is it's like the Tesco club card. No, I haven't gone mad, just bear with me on this metaphor. Right, so the Tesco club card, how does it work? Well, you get points to spend in the store, don't you? How do your points accrue? Well, the more money you spend and the more time that you spend shopping there, the more points you will have. It's just the same with the NHS pension. The more that you earn whilst you work in the NHS and the longer that you work for the NHS for, the more pension benefits you will accrue, okay? So you do contribute to the NHS pension, but there's no pot of money. It's accrual of benefits that you are entitled to at that normal pension age. The rate that you contribute, you can see in the table on the right hand side, it's based on your pay before tax, and essentially out of your pay packet each month, a contribution is going to be coming out, and that's based on the amount that you earn before tax, and it's a percentage per year that you'll be paying. The NHS also contributes based on your earnings before tax, and that's 23.7%. But you might be thinking, okay, but if there's no pot of money, where is all of this going? Effectively, it's a big cash flow exercise. You, when you're contributing to the NHS pension, are in effect paying for those who are currently retired and receiving the benefits. It's just one big flow. Just to be really nice and clear, the benefits that you're accruing, they're really valuable because as the cost of living goes up, so do your benefits to make sure that they buy the same amount over time. And that's in line with what we call CPI, the Consumer Price Index. As I said before, just to be really nice and clear, it's going to pay you monthly from the point that you retire until the point that you die. And the risk is on your employer to fund this. So again, think of this like one big cash flow exercise of which you're a member, and by your employer, the guarantee effectively is coming from the UK government. So it's a pretty good government guarantee to have. Thank you, Faisal. Okay, right. So you've got this valuable NHS pension. It's quite convoluted, but now hopefully getting to grips with it a bit. How do you make this even more valuable? You might be thinking, retirement's on the horizon, or it might be something that's on your mind, or as Faisal alluded to earlier, it might be something where you want to get onto the front foot and start enhancing your pension as much as possible. Now, these are your options. In the 1995 scheme, I've highlighted in green there that you do have the option with regards to creating added years in the pension and increasing the size of your tax-free lump sum. However, you'll see straight away that you need to have been a member before 1978 and 1972 respectively. Very, very long time ago. Moving over to the 08 scheme, you'll see that none of those options are available for increasing your pension. And then over on the 15 scheme, of which you may be a member now, you can actually buy an additional £8,721 annual pension. What does that actually mean? Okay, well, let's just say you've got £10,000 per year already accrued in the 2015 scheme. You can purchase an additional £8,721 maximum. So therefore at retirement, you would have now £18,721 per year paying you from your state pension age until death. What's the cost of buying that? I did a calculation which is freely available on the NHS pension website. It would cost you over a 10-year period, if that's what you selected, about £150,000. So it's very expensive to purchase additional pension in the 2015 scheme. Also, you can see ERBO there. That stands for Early Retirement Reduction Buyout. Do you remember I said earlier that if you retire under the normal pension age, the NHS pension will reduce the amount that you receive per year. This gives you the option to basically buy out that reduction so you don't incur it. You can do that down to a minimum of age 65, but again, it's a very expensive thing to do. So now we're at the MPAVC and the stakeholder pension as two more options for increasing your pension. But what the NHS have done here is they've basically facilitated you setting up a separate private pension. It's nothing to do with the NHS pension whatsoever. It's a private pension. Your money will be invested this time. You will need to select where your money is invested. And as Faisal mentioned earlier, you will also have to make sure if this is what is important to you, to make sure that is Sharia compliant. The onus is upon you. What the NHS is doing here is it's basically facilitating taking money out of your pay each month and either before or after tax, putting it into that pension for you. Now, with each of those, they are doing it through either Prudential or Standard Life, and the onus is on you to decide how that's invested and how much you contribute. They are just helping you facilitate it. So therefore, that begs the question, well, if you're investing in a private pension, but you're not receiving any advice in terms of how to make that Sharia compliant and get the most out of it, make sure your money's working hard for you, really that's a fantastic opportunity then to look at taking upon financial advice to make sure the investment choice is Sharia compliant, and also that when you want to call upon the money at retirement, you can do so flexibly in a way that suits you. I took a look at the small print on the MPAVC and the stakeholder pensions. They don't actually facilitate you taking your money out of those pensions. You would have to do a move of your pension at a later date if you wanted to access that. And then also finally here, if you are then considering starting a private pension aside from your NHS pension, well, that begs the question, have you got all of your eggs in one basket with regards to pensions? And so that presents the opportunity of looking at other investment types and also exploring whether there's potential for greater growth there as well. And again, you would do that by taking on board financial advice. Next slide, please, Faisal. Right, so earlier I mentioned that in the 1995 scheme in particular, when people get to age 55 to 60, retirement is really on the horizon. It's something they're thinking about a lot. This will be something that you may find useful, but also for those of you where you just want to start thinking about retirement and considering not working every day of the rest of your life, this also will be useful. So one of the things that you've got available to you is called partial retirement. And you'll see here it's available in each of these schemes, the 95, the 08 and the 15. Next slide, please. And what is this? Well, basically, it's over the age of 55. You're taking all or part of your NHS pension, so you're receiving those benefits, and then you are continuing to work in the NHS pension. Work in the NHS because you haven't quite got ready to stop working at this point. This has always been available in the 08 and the 15 schemes, but actually in the 95 scheme, this only became available as of 2023. So how do you do this? Well, you take 100% up to 100% of your pension plus your tax-free cash in the 95 scheme, and you basically reduce your pensionable pay by 10% for the first 12 months. And you can do this twice. You don't have to make it absolute the first time around. Before then, you trigger what's called retire and return at a later date. And it's only for people who are currently contributing to the NHS pension at the moment. Next slide, please. This is also sometimes referred to as drawdown, and you must actually change your employment terms and conditions to facilitate that 10% pay reduction. You can continue contributing to the NHS pension, or you can decide to stop. There's no 24-hour retirement that's needed. You may have heard of that elsewhere. You can still do overtime and bank work because that's not pensionable. And if you have natural pay increases, they won't interfere with your 10% pay reduction. So really the crux of this here is you can take a minimum of 20% of your benefits or a maximum of 100%. So if you have £10,000 benefit in the 1995 scheme, you can take a minimum of £2,000 per year, or you can take the full £10,000 per year. And so this is a way of actually taking your pension, but you're not quite ready to stop working entirely. And so you do continue to work in the NHS. You just need to take a 10% pay reduction for the first 12 months. You need to discuss that with your employer because they're going to help you set it up. And next slide, please, Faisal.
Yeah, sure.
And then finally, retire and return. This is something that I find people know a bit more about. So you are taking your full benefits from either the 95, 08 and or 15 scheme, and then you return to work again. And the key questions here to ask and to answer are, is pensionable re-employment permitted? Are you able to go back into employment and contribute to the 15 scheme again? What about abatement? That's something that's been a bit of a thorn in the side of this in years gone by. And do I need to take a break before retiring? Before I answer those, I'll just answer this one question. Will my pension benefits be affected? The quick and simple answer is no. If you are at your normal retirement age, so for the 95 scheme 60, the 08 scheme 65, or the 15 scheme state pension age, your pension will not be affected if you return to work in the NHS. It's only if you retire before each of those respective normal retirement ages. And then the final two slides here is pensionable re-employment permitted? Well, no, because the 95 and the 08 schemes are closed. However, yes, with the 15 scheme, that's still available and it's still open to you. And the abatement rule, which has always been in the thorn in the side of public sector schemes, such as the NHS pension, that issue was actually removed in 2024. Basically, it was something that was stifling people because it was a rule whereby you weren't allowed to retire, take your pension, go back into employment and effectively earn more than you were before you retired. It was a bit of a silly rule. It's now been removed. So just you can remove that out of the equation. Faisal, final slide, please. And then, do I need to take a break before retiring? In each of these cases, 95, 08 and 15 schemes, you need to take a 24-hour break. However, the rule whereby you could only work 16 hours for the next month, 16 hours per week for the next month, that's also been removed as well. So for those of you who are thinking about retiring relatively soon, there's partial retirement that's available to you. Retire and return is available to you. All of the information is available on the NHS pension website, and you'll see that some of the tricky rules that did exist from about 2023 onwards have now been removed. So it makes it a lot easier for you to take part in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate that. As you can see from what Jack's presented in a very short space of time, it is quite complex. And for many on this call, apologies, if this is something that's not in your mind, I know there's some young people, maybe some students who have joined us, and this will be quite alien to them. But I think for others that we come across regularly, people who've been working in the NHS for a while, and have spent 10, 20 years, this is something that they are very au fait with to an extent, at least the NHS scheme, and they do find it difficult and they do need help. So, it is something that hopefully, inshallah, we can help you with. Yeah, thanks for going through that, Jack, in such a great way. Thank you. I'm very cognizant of time. We will rattle through the next few slides, and I really want you to take from it the fact that there are some pertinent points which we can help you with, and really to kind of give you an essence of the areas which we might be able to help you with in financial planning and financial advice. So what we just talked about is the NHS scheme, which is a workplace pension scheme. When you're employed by the NHS, you have access to that scheme. A lot of healthcare professionals, they do private work. They also may want to set up additional pensions, private pensions, because essentially pensions represent a great kind of way to save for the long term, very tax efficient, and actually can have many, many benefits. So the private pension side to things is when it comes to Sharia compliant pensions, you can set up a private pension. You need to be careful of where the money is invested. You'll need to think about zakat and income purification if there is any kind of interest being earned in those investments, for example. And you need to think about how you take income from your pension, because there are methods which are maybe not Sharia compliant, but others are. And ultimately, how you actually distribute your pension on death, because obviously Islam also caters for laws around inheritance. So basically, we're just going to look at the private pension planning opportunities you may have. And essentially, pensions offer the ability to get tax relief on your pension contributions. Within a pension, many people don't realize, but within a pension, the investments that you have, they grow basically tax-free. So there's no capital gains tax or income tax within a pension. And when you do take your pension benefits, you can usually get a 25% tax-free lump sum. So these are some of the kind of the tax benefits of pensions. And again, the point I was making earlier, look at this example here. The power of compounding comes back into this really. So if you start saving for your retirement, the earlier you start, the better. So here we've got an example of someone who's age 30, who's putting £1,000 aside into a pension every month, and it's based every month, yeah, and it's growing at 7% per annum. At the age of 65, over 35 years, they would have accumulated a pot of 1.45 million. But the real, if you delayed that by 5 years, the fund value would be just over £1 million. So can you see the huge difference of the compounding effect of that investment over time? Even delaying by 5 years can have such a significant impact, and even just delaying by 1 year. So again, the lesson is start saving as early as possible, as much as possible, and invest wisely. Basically, when you're planning for retirement, you've got your workplace pension, such as the NHS pension. You've got the ability to put money into a private pension, and then you'll also have access to the state pension. And when we do retirement planning for people, we look at all the different sources of income they may have when they want to retire, maybe a phased retirement. But essentially, you will have other things. Lots of people have buy-to-let properties and the like, where that all contributes to the income you can have in retirement. And it all helps to have a more relaxed retirement, inshallah, with better quality of life, etc. In private pensions, the tax relief works different to workplace pensions. With workplace pensions, let's say you're getting a salary of £50,000 and you're putting £10,000 into a pension. You'll then basically be taxed only on £40,000, and you would have saved tax on the £10,000 you put into the pension. Now, in that example, you still would have been a basic rate taxpayer, and you would have saved yourself £2,000 of tax at 20%. In the private pensions, the tax relief works in a slightly different way. And the way it works is that because you're paying money from your income, which is in your bank account, which is already been taxed, the tax relief works in a separate way. So for a basic rate taxpayer, they will put £80, for example, into a pension, and the government will top it up by 25%. They'll add 20%, £20 to that pension. So basically, for £100 into your pension, it's only cost you £80. Now, when you're a higher rate taxpayer, someone who's paying tax of 40%, that same thing will happen, that when you put £80 in, they will put £20 in. But when you come to do your tax return at the end of the year, you claim another £20 of tax relief. So that £100 contribution that's gone into your pension is actually only cost you £60. And if you're someone who's earning over £125,000 a year and you're a higher, what we call an additional rate taxpayer, then the amount you can claim on your tax return is £25 instead of, because your marginal rate of tax is 45%. So that £100 that's gone into your pensions only cost you £55. So you can see how powerful the tax relief is, and that you get through a private pension. I just don't want to go too much into this slide because of time, but essentially there are limits to what you can put into your pension, and you need to be aware of that. Essentially, the main limit being that you can put up to your earnings, or a maximum of £60,000, whatever is higher. So I mean, lower than that. So if you're earning 80,000, you can only put 60,000 into a pension. Its maximum would be 60,000. The other boxes, that's the blue box here. The other boxes are slightly different situations, which also apply in terms. So you must check how much you can put into a pension in your situation. It's not just a limitless pot of money they can put into. In terms of the income tax rates, you may be familiar with this. There are bandings of. We've got the budget coming up on the 26th of November. Things may change, but as of today, basically, up to 12,570 is basically at a 0% tax. And then you've got the bandings, which are shown on the screen. So these are important to know because effectively the tax goes up quite significantly from one band to another. What I really want to just focus on for a few minutes, just go another 3-4 minutes at least, if I may, is there are some really key planning opportunities with pensions. So the one that is a really good one to highlight here is for those who are earning over £100,000 and in that bracket of 100,000 to 125,000, for every basically £2 you earn over £100,000, you lose £1 of your personal allowance. So your personal allowance is 12,570. So basically, that there's a very dangerous bracket there that you're losing your personal allowance. Now, pension can help in the fact that, let's say someone's earning £110,000, they can elect through their employer to put £10,000 more into their pension, potentially, that way of doing it, to basically reduce their taxable earnings to £100,000. So you're saving your personal allowance, and you're not only getting the pension tax relief, but you're also saving your personal allowance. So you're actually saving a tax, something like 60% for every extra pound you're earning in that bracket over £100,000. It's a very powerful way. It's called salary sacrifice. You may have heard of it. A lot of people overlook the fact that you can start a pension pretty much for your kids. And when you've seen those examples of compounding, your kids will be very happy with you when they get to 55 or 60 and you started a pension for them when they were younger, because they'll basically really benefit from the compounding effect. And those who are self-employed, the last two boxes, basically, there's a lot of healthcare professionals who do private work as in addition to their salaried role. They often do it through a limited company, and you can basically make contributions. The limited company can make contributions on behalf of you as an employee of that limited company or a director of that limited company, and they can get corporation tax relief, which can be very, very good. And you can actually also use a pension through what we call a self-invested personal pension or a small self-administered scheme, SAS, to buy commercial property. And a lot of healthcare professionals, doctors and the like, can use that opportunity to buy their surgery, for example, through their pension monies. And that can have a very virtuous cycle in terms of saving tax and accumulating something for you for the future. And again, if it's any of these opportunities appeal to you, please do reach out to us and we can, talk you through them. I'm going to probably not go through this because of time, but suffice to say, there are opportunities to save tax as well. So your marriage allowance, there is something called a marriage allowance where for a couple, if someone is earning less than 12,570, one of the partners in the marriage, then you can transfer some of their personal allowance, up to 10% of their personal allowance, to the spouse who's earning more money. That spouse has to be earning up to 50,270, and so they have to be a basic rate taxpayer. But the planning opportunity here in terms of using pensions is that, let's say someone's earning 55,000 or 53,000. By putting money into a pension, they can reduce their taxable amount to below 50,271, and thereby the marriage allowance can still work. And then effectively the child benefit, if you're earning above 60,000, you start losing some of the child benefit you're getting. Again, by putting money into a pension, you can reduce that amount to below 60,000 and save on not losing that child benefit. And remember, your non-earning spouse, you may have a situation that one of the spouses is not earning. They can also contribute into the pension up to £2,880, and the government will put £720 into the pension for them. So these are all opportunities to make use of the pension system to save you tax and actually to make, to accumulate a pot for the future. So really, the last couple of minutes on this is really, we have within Simply Ethical, we have an online service as well as a personal financial advice service. It's the way the modern world is going now in financial services. It's basically a lot of it is through online investing platforms. Things are digitized quite a bit. And what you can do is that you can basically bring together your pensions you may have got over the years from different employers, bring them under one roof. Your ISAs you may have in different places, you can bring them under one roof onto one place through our online platform. So, we have basically an online portal which you can use for that. We also basically give financial advice for those who need it, for come up with a financial plan and help you really put together something which is going to help you navigate your financial future and life to achieve your goals. And you please do go onto our website. I just wanted to highlight also, we're a financial advisory firm and an investment management firm, but there are a plethora of choices out there for you in terms of different things. So on the investment side, you've got these people. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the main players on the investment side. You can check out what they've got to offer. There's a whole suite of products which is very healthy for the industry. On the savings side, you've got Islamic banks which are offering deposit accounts which are Sharia compliant. There's a firm called NISPA. They have a very good summary on their website. I would urge you to go and have a look at that. There's a platform called Raisin where they have you have one application which can go to multiple banks, and basically they have a Sharia offering on there as well. In terms of home finance and other property finance, there are a number of players out there. Again, there are two brokerage firms which I would highly recommend, Halal Options and Precept Finance. They can do a lot of the legwork for you in terms of finding out what the best deals are for you in your situation. And on the pension side, we're very active on that area, and Wahid also have got a pension offering on their platform. So that's basically it from the presentation side. Sorry, we've gone a little bit over. I'm happy to field questions for a good 15-20 minutes. It's not a problem for me, for those who can stay on. I do apologize for those who do need to go, because I appreciate it's quite late in the evening. But you can essentially visit our website, our blog as well, email us. And the free consultation is really what I think I would urge you to do if you've got any areas you want to discuss in your personal finances, and we'd be delighted to have that with you. But yeah, please, I think that we can have some time now for questions and answers, inshallah. Yeah, for myself or Jack, inshallah.
Perfect. Jazakallah khair. So we do have a few questions on the Q&A section. Just a reminder for everyone that sent a question on the chat, please direct your questions to the Q&A section. So there's a few questions about sort of the general setup with and services of Simply Ethical. Would you like me to go through those, brother Faisal?
Yeah, please, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first question is, how much are your rates to advise and manage capital?
So on the online side, you basically, which a lot of people effectively will be eligible for, and probably the right thing for them if they just want to set up a simple ISA or a pension. The rates are there. They're the most competitive in the market, I think, in our segment of the market. I mean, they start from 0.75% per annum. So to put it into perspective, for a £10,000 investment, you will pay us £75 for the year. And the actual that rate of 0.75 goes down the more you invest. So it's tiered. The more you invest, the less you pay effectively in terms of a percentage. But on the personal financial advice side, that's more like a professional fee for our time. And typically, we will charge pretty much in line with the time we spend. So the typical charges would be something like, for a financial plan and advice, you're talking probably something in the region of £1,000 to £1,500, and then an ongoing fee for ongoing advice and management of your portfolio if you invest with us, which will be typically around 1% per annum. So that's typically the kind of fees that we charge, which you'll find very competitive with the market. Yeah. So we try to be very competitive in the market.
Great. I think this was already addressed during the presentation. But having opted out of NHS pension scheme, can I now join it retrospectively?
Jack, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, certainly. So having opted out the NHS budget, yeah, can I please? Yeah. So in essence, yes, you can. So again, thinking of that Tesco club card example. Okay, so you spent a while shopping at Aldi. You maybe got a bit frustrated with the Tesco's high prices, but then you realise actually all the fruit and veg goes off too quickly, and so you had to go back to Tesco again. Yes, you can go back. There's absolutely no problem. Basically, if you spent 2 years not in the 15 scheme and then you decided to opt back into it, given that you are eligible to opt back into it, the bar's relatively low in terms of the criteria you need to meet. All that would have happened is you just missed those 2 years of accrual of benefits. So you'll start up from where you left off. So yes, you can rejoin if you previously decided to opt out.
Thank you, Jack.
Perfect. Who are the Islamic scholars / oversight regarding the Sharia compliance of Simply Ethical?
Yeah, so we have a body called Sharia Review Bureau, which are very well known in the industry. They're based in Bahrain, but they have scholars from all over the world. So the way their business model works is that they have a panel of scholars, I think stretching beyond 30, 40 scholars. They pick and obviously choose based on their competence and their specialisms, and the fact that they have a specialism in Islamic finance. And then essentially they assign scholars to us for consultation, review, audit, etc. So we have Mufti Faraz Adam, who is a very well-known Islamic scholar in the UK, and Sheikh Muhammad, who used to be a student of Sheikh Mufti Taqi Osmani, and he's not based in the UK, but you can see their profiles on our website. And we have an annual audit as well through them. And for all of our Sharia procedures, processes, all our products, they're all reviewed and signed off by them as well.
What kind of things should we invest in to help better the growth of the power of compounding?
Well, I mean, so it's a good question in the sense that in the world of investment, there are numerous options out there. Where we kind of sit is we very much deal with regulated investments which are suitable for the retail market. So basically, there's a criteria there, and our investments are also covered by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. So essentially, they are investments were typically very liquid, so you can sell them quite easily and get your money out. They are public listed investments generally, so they're on the public markets, and they're easily tradable. They're very much transparent in the world, and that's very much investments that are suitable for the retail market. And typically, those investments, the heart of those investments are equities, really shares. And their companies essentially on the major stock markets like the US market, the UK market, European markets, etc. And these investments, you'll see from the data on our website, typically will give you a return depending on how much risk you take, as investment is inextricably linked to risk. How much risk you take will kind of dictate the potential return you can make. And typically, in a kind of a medium risk portfolio, you're looking at a return of around 6-7% per annum. That's kind of the ballpark of return. And the compounding really will kind of work on that kind of, some years will be good, some years will be not so good. But essentially, if you kind of work on that kind of average return of 7%, it just means that what you invest today goes up by 7%. You reinvest, that goes up by 7%, but you also add in more money. And that just all, there's like a snowball effect, which kind of just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's really the power of compounding. But you need it to give it time to really see the true benefits of that for over a long period of time. But in the world of investing, you can invest in physical property, you can invest in more sophisticated instruments like private limited companies, and none of these are wrong. It just means that there are a range of investments out there, and some of the firms I talked about, they will have different investments to us. And you really just need to, what my real advice to anyone is, whatever you invest in, do your due diligence and be aware of the risks as well as the potential returns. And if you don't have the capacity or the skills to do that due diligence, then give it to someone who does and take their professional advice. And the other watch out I would say is, there, if you are kind of a relatively unsophisticated investor, then it's better to go for a regulated investment where there's some protection from the FCA for you. And generally, for more sophisticated investments, you do need a certain criteria to meet that criteria. Otherwise, you will not be eligible to invest in those things. So, I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
What advice would you give to current university students? Should I start investing now, or should I save money to pay my parents back? In this instance, it's covering the cost of university for this person. I guess also it can be applied to paying back the student loans too.
Yeah. So this is the point that if you're saving to pay parents back or pay the student loan off, then it's better to save in a way where you're not just leaving that money in a bank, letting it just accumulate over 3, 4, 5 years or whatever to do that. It's better to deploy that money in some sort of investment now, albeit you don't want to take too much risk perhaps, but there are investment options. Even on our platform, you'll see there's 7 model portfolios we've got from low risk to high risk. So you can choose a relatively cautious portfolio, for example, but at least that money is working for you. So when you want to pay that money back or use that money for something, it's actually been keeping up with inflation, hopefully beating inflation, and it's actually productive. So what you might want to leave in the bank is emergency cash or cash you need for a rainy day and for your needs. But beyond that, really, you should be deploying that money into something productive. Yeah. Even if it's not in a risky or, investment such as stocks and shares or something which has risk attached to it, maybe an Islamic deposit account. Yeah. But at least it's doing something rather than doing nothing. There's a very key and important lesson.
My FAVC will mature in June 2027. How can I shield it from inheritance tax?
Faisal, would you like me to grab that?
Yes, please, if you don't.
I'll be really clear here as well. This isn't financial advice. We have to be really clear on this. We're providing guidance because this one's quite specific. So Okay, so you've got a freestanding AVC. So basically what you've got with the FS AVC means freestanding AVC. The AVC means additional voluntary contributions. So as I mentioned in the slides earlier, when you make additional voluntary contributions, what the NHS has done is they've facilitated an avenue to take some of your pay, your monthly pay, and redirect it to a private pension. It's not owned by the NHS, it's not controlled by the NHS in any way. They've just helped you with an alternative pot to save your money. And that pot, it's an invested pot of money privately, usually via Prudential or Standard Life. So that's what you've got. When you say it comes to maturity in 2027, I believe what you may mean is you're coming to around about age 55 at the point at which you can start to take benefits. Maybe that's what you mean. How do you shield it from inheritance tax? Now, in 2027, what the government has said their intention is for pensions which previously haven't been exposed to inheritance tax, is for them to fall inside your estate and thereby exposing them to inheritance tax. So when you value the value of your estate, which would include your house, cash in the bank, other investments, pensions are going to be lumped in there as well. Okay, so we've set the scene now. How can you shield that pension from inheritance tax? Well, number one, we're making the assumption that this actually will come to fruition. So as we've all seen over the past few years, especially the COVID and then the post-COVID years, each budget has come with, well, in advance, many speculated changes. And then the budget itself has come with many changes. And then actually the budget after that has come with some changes that have reversed the changes that came before it. So number one, what I'm trying to get at here is it's an ever-changing landscape. What I'm constantly seeing at the moment is specialists within the pension industry lobbying the government for them to change their mind on this. So first and foremost, until we get to April the 6th, 2027, I wouldn't take it for granted that that is exactly what is going to happen because it hasn't been written into law yet. So I'm always very cautious of making plans and changes based on something that doesn't yet exist. I always like to play with the facts that I know are more certain, which is the way the current legislation works. So number one, just always be careful of making changes in your financial plans based on what may or may not happen in the future. Okay, so let's say that in April 6th, 2027, pensions do fall inside your estate. So you want to shield them from inheritance tax. What can you do? Without sounding too tongue-in-cheek, you can either spend it or give it away. They're the ways of removing assets from your estate. So when I say spend it, I mean if you actually have a need for it yourself within your lifetime, a bit like when you're on an aeroplane, they say you put your oxygen mask on first. You use it yourself if that's what you absolutely need it for. If you don't personally need it or foresee that you'll need it within your lifetime, you can give it away. And I don't mean be stupid about how you give it away, but if, for example, you can see opportunities for sadaqah, brilliant, fantastic, charitable donations. It could be closer to home if you have children or grandchildren, relatives, people who are in need, who could do with the money more than yourself. You can gift it. And I won't go into all the mechanisms of how that works, but essentially you would need to outlive your gifts by 7 years in order for them not to incur inheritance tax. That's a different depth for another day. And then you could also consider putting it into trust as well. Not the pension itself, you would need to withdraw the money from the pension, but there's always the facility of a trust. So if you wanted to preserve this money so that it lasts for different generations down the line, you could also think of gifting it into a trust, which means cutting your ties with it. You can no longer benefit from that money yourself. However, you can then designate beneficiaries who could benefit from that money. And once an asset is put inside a trust, it doesn't form part of your estate. So hopefully that gives you a bit of kind of the lay of the land in terms of pensions and inheritance tax as we stand at the moment.
Thanks, Jack. Any further questions?
We have quite a few. We can take a couple
Yeah.
more, if that's okay with
Yeah, that's fine. Let's hope so.
you. One person asked, for the pension, can we see an example of the calculation of a scenario?
Sorry, say that. Just repeat that, please. Ashton.
For the pension, can we see an example of the calculation of a scenario?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure what that means, but it's essentially so you know, on a private pension. So what will happen is, you know, you put in, let's say, £1,000 a month. That's a lot, by the way. Not many people can afford that, but let's just, for the sake of keeping the figures round, the government will then basically put in £250 for you. And that, I was telling a friend of mine on the weekend about this, and he was astonished that the government will put in 25% of whatever you put in, and he was really kind of motivated to then start his personal pension or do something with pension. So a lot of people don't realize that's kind of guaranteed money from the government. That's the way of them giving you tax relief. So now you've got 1,250 in your pension scheme. That money is then invested, and you can see on our website this type of funds that we use and what we invest in, and effectively that money will grow at a rate. You know, it will be different every year, but let's say on average 7% per annum. And then essentially, you know, as further contributions come in, more government tax relief is added, the money is growing through the investment and it's compounding up, and that's how it works. And that's how there are calculators out there which will then model that for you in terms of how that money, that pot will grow over time. And how it can benefit. So from a pension, the powerful thing really is there's probably no other vehicle to invest in the UK for an ordinary person uh, to get the tax relief that pension gives you. So not only is the government effectively saying whatever you put in, we're going to give you tax relief. That if basically in terms of people moving money in through their workplace, they're saving tax from the PAYE that's not they're not paying, or in a private pension, is they're actually adding money onto the pension, and then if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you actually even get more money back from the government at the end of the tax year. So that's how it's kind of the money flows within a pension, and that's how it kind of goes up in value. I hope that explains it. But I obviously don't have the facility to sort of, you know, write out an example to show exactly the maths of that, but you can get the picture. Yeah. I hope that's clear.
Are there
Another question?
Are there interest-free Islamic compliant ways of investing your NHS pension?
Yes, the NHS pension, as Jack explained, is basically, if it's the question around the NHS pension, this is actually the money is not invested, as Jack was explaining. The money that you're paying into the pension is actually paying other people's pension as they're coming out on the other side. And that's how they're kind of using it as a big cash flow exercise. So the money that you're putting into the NHS pension is not actually, there's no interest involved as such because there's no investment. So it's a kind of a cash flow exercise. So but when it comes to private pensions and where the money is invested, then you are investing into instruments such as shares and, you know, the like, and you know, if the question is that if you can get a completely free, riba free, or you know, completely pure investment, yes, you could. You can invest purely, for example, in a self-invested personal pension. You could choose to invest, for example, purely in gold, for example, or you know, an asset such as a property, a commercial property, which has no debt attached to it. It's harder to do it. It's not impossible to do it. And so at Simply Ethical, we are working really hard to try to be that for that to become a reality as much as possible. So we've got some very exciting plans, inshallah, for the future where we're trying to come up with our own investment funds. And the driver behind that is to produce investments which are truly Sharia compliant in the best possible sense of the word. And you know, really trying to push that bar as fast and as hard as we can. And I think the whole industry is working towards that. And like I said at the beginning, we're on a journey with Islamic finance, because a modern form of Islamic finance has only existed for about 50 years, whereas the modern financial industry and system has existed for centuries, effectively. So we are against the tide to a certain extent, but Alhamdulillah, we've made really good progress across the world, as in the industry has, in what it's got to offer. But there's a lot of challenges, a lot of hard work still to do, inshallah.
Inshallah. We'll take one final question now,
Yeah.
just for the sake of time. If I pass away, will my spouse or kids get my pension?
Yes, they would. So the way to do that is that you would have a letter of wishes, and your will as well, and they that would designate who the beneficiaries to your pension are. But essentially, you would. I mean, there are rules around the way you take your pension in retirement, and there is one of the ways is annuity. So annuity says they'll pay you a guaranteed income for the rest of your life from the pot of money you have. Now, as it happens, that is not a Sharia compliant way of taking your pension. So no client of Simply Ethical has used that option, because we obviously advise on Sharia compliant options. So the way that people take pensions that we generally advise on is something called income drawdown, which effectively means that, argument's sake, you've got £100,000 in your pension at the age of retirement. The very common way of taking the pension is to take the 25% lump sum tax free. So someone takes £25,000 tax free. You now got £75,000 left in the pot. That £75,000 remains invested, but you start taking from that 75,000 in the way which you decide completely at your discretion. So you might want to take a monthly amount, you might want to take ad hoc amounts. But as of the date of when you pass away, let's say there's £50,000 left in that pot. That £50,000 now will pass on to your beneficiaries according to the way you've designated through your will and what we call a letter of wishes attached to the will. I mean, to attach to the pension, and then that they will get that the pension accordingly. Now there is current legislation around. There's essentially no inheritance tax on pensions, but the government is contemplating changing that. There is some rulings that potentially would come out around putting pensions into the inheritance tax bracket as well, or within the net. But Jack, do you want to share any further thoughts on that? Or?
My thought here was this could be in relation, this question, to the NHS pension. So
Okay.
I just didn't want to I didn't want that person not to have their question answered.
Of course,
So I thought
of course.
Even if they didn't, maybe someone will find this useful. So with your NHS pension, it is the sort of pension that dies with you. In terms of when you die, the payments stop. However, there is an element of life cover attached to it as well. It's something that not many people have heard about or spent much time looking into. So I thought it might be worth just signposting them to the fact that it exists. So it differs depending on whether you're currently a contributing member or whether you used to contribute, but you are no longer contributing. So that will be the case for the 95 and the 08 sections, maybe the 15 if you opted out, or if you are actually retired and receiving your benefits. But just to give you a bit of a flavour of what this looks like, for example, if you are currently a member and you pass away, with regards to your NHS pension, the payments will stop. 2 times your pensionable earnings will be provided to your nominees. So quite often that's your spouse. So say, for example, you earn £50,000 per year, your spouse is going to have £100,000 tax-free as a lump sum. And then thereafter, there are amounts that your adult dependent will receive. So that's either your spouse or adults that depend upon you, and children. Gets very complicated, but just the highlight figures are for the 95 scheme, that's 50% of your pension. So an adult dependent spouse or someone that depends upon you financially, which was therefore thereafter receive 50% of your pension, and then it decreases. So it's 37.5% of your 08 scheme, and it's 33.75% of your 15 scheme. There's also a small amount that children receive that's generally up to the age of 23, unless they're remaining in full-time education, I believe. I'm kind of rattling this off the top of my head, but I just wanted people to understand your NHS payments do stop if you pass away. However, it doesn't mean that your spouse, your children are left completely without something. There are benefits that they do still receive. So it's worthwhile contacting NHS pensions, asking if you can receive some more information about that. And also, as you mentioned a moment ago, Faisal, nominating who you would like to receive that money as well, because it's going to make life a lot easier for those people to get hold of those funds once you've passed away.
Isham, I'd just like to say very quickly, today there's been a lot thrown at everyone. Some of it may be relevant to you and your life stage, some of it may be not, and some of it may be overwhelming. I do appreciate all of that. What we've tried to do is give a very much a foundation, sort of broad overview of financial planning when it comes to healthcare professionals. Like with anything, there are nuances, there are specific areas that you may need to focus on or want to focus on. And so please don't be put off by anything that's been said today, but rather just be aware that, it's quite a big field, and we're here to sort of help you in those areas where you want to focus on. And if we can't help you, hopefully we know someone who can. So there may be a specialist that you may need to speak to, or you want to consider wider investment options and what Simply Ethical has to offer. We will happily help you navigate that as well. So it's been a pleasure to really have this opportunity. I hope you guys all found it very useful, and thank you for the time, and thank you for the opportunity from BIMA for this as well. And your feedback would be really useful, because we can make this better next time for people as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
Amazing. Jazakallah khair, Faisal and Jack, for the amazing session. It was really informative and extremely beneficial, alhamdulillah. I know there was a lot of questions that unfortunately we didn't get to go through, but a lot of you may have scanned the QR code that Faisal put up on the slides, which will allow you to have a free 15-minute consultation with Simply Ethical, or as I mentioned previously, for the paying BIMA members, you can have a free half-an-hour consultation with Simply Ethical by going through your BIMA portal, as well as having access to the other membership perks with BIMA as well. We'll end the webinar here. Again, Jazakallah khair to Faisal and Jack and the rest of Simply Ethical for coming and helping us, and for everyone else for attending too.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Wa alaikum assalam. Jazakallah khair.